My name is Dennise Williams, and this is Financially Focused, and we are about growth and empowerment. And we have a very special guest because normally we're always talking about financial planning and real estate and credit restoration and career development. But we want to take a special look at gender. Yes, we're putting the lens on gender in terms of entrepreneurship and standard of living and all of the elements that make entrepreneurship work. So, as a woman, the best person to talk to about gender is a man. So we are joined by Kadam Knife, who holds a PhD in Sustainable Development and MSc in Economics. His research, Dr. Knife's research, is on social entrepreneurship, under which gender falls, and the application of dynamic strategic planning techniques in planning, policy, and project development. And I really want to stress the part of strategic planning, because in this episode, I'll pull out my phone and talk about something that personally bothers me. And it says here, there's a report recently that women in Jamaica lost ground in all major categories on the path to parity with men, according to the Global Gender Gap 2024 report. Dr. Knife, you're about, sustainable development.
Yeah.
And you're a man.
Yeah.
How do you feel about 50% of your people losing ground? We actually lost 13 points in this survey.
So all data presented tend to be relative, which means that in relation to other European countries and other countries, a number of persons have surpassed Jamaica in terms of what they are doing as related to gender. In Jamaica itself, it probably means that things have not changed much, but that is still not what you're about. We created a gender policy in 2014, I mean, it's shameful, man.
This report is shameful.
Yeah, because 2014, I think we have the gender policy. We created the Bureau of Gender Affairs, and they were mandated to do a number of things that will help to call mainstreaming gender in everything.
Yes.
When you look at the scholarship, and by the way, my research in terms of gender was really led by Ms. Candice Ramesar. She's a gender specialist in the region, which I learned a lot of these things from. And when we're looking at these things, the objective of the Bureau of Gender Affairs is to empower women to empower themselves.
Right.
But you can't expect the gender affairs space, which is placed in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Intelligence and Sports, to do these things if you don't have adequate resources.
So you're saying the ministry doesn't have the resources, and then women in Jamaica don't have the resources?
No, the ministry have the resources.
Yes.
And the institution with the mandate to support gender mainstreaming is under-resourced.
Right.
And this is a major problem in Jamaica for all essential service providers who target vulnerable groups. They are always under-resourced. So we're putting in place a good policy.
Yes.
With clear directives and clear strategies.
Yes.
But the team now, which is supposed to implement these things, and the supporting system that is supposed to facilitate the growth and nurturing of whatever the objectives are, they are not resourced properly. So if you look at the mainstreaming literature, when I say about gender mainstreaming, the argument is that the infrastructure development must reflect mainstreaming gender, and it captures not just women or men, but looking at people with special needs, which are also across genders, youth is across gender as well. So it is very inclusive in terms of how it is structured. So when I enter into a place like this now, I must recognize that, okay, because you have more women working in this building than men, you probably have more bathroom facilities that can accommodate women than men. The lighting might be different elements that reflect concern about safety and security of women will be there. Likewise, you will see ramps, etc., to make it easier for a person with special needs to move through the spaces.
Right.
How the images around the space will reflect that equality as well. The publications, how the data is presented, should be segregated to reflect those. And the planning process must include gender imperatives from the ideation stage through the implementation stage. Even the ratio of employees in terms of men-women ratio, those are things that we are looking at. Now I'm saying Jamaica have the policy, it have the information,
yes,
but you cannot practice without resources.
But
So that's what has been reflected in that thing, I think.
so the fact that we've slipped 13 points, what is your view of how that affects the woman on the ground?
No, but
Let's look at entrepreneurship
Yeah, but
first.
it has significant implications because members, as you mentioned earlier, you probably should speak about that data, which shows that in terms of economics is one of the areas that you have a major slippage.
Yes.
Now is increasingly worrying for countries like Jamaica. And let me tell you why. For a number of reasons. And coming out of some of the research, as I mentioned earlier, by Nicholson and Garvey, we look at family-owned businesses, and women involved in those businesses. I think what they argue is that when a man owns a business, he says his business. When a woman owns a business, she says her family business. And that's a very serious statement because it means that when the woman is operating her business, in the front of her mind, not the back of her mind, in the front of her mind, is that this business is crucial because it is going to support my family. You'll find that during COVID, a lot of needs entrepreneurship emerge, because they have different kinds of things that drive entrepreneurship. A lot of those were being operated by women.
Yes.
Because they often make sure, say, something is happening there, whether it be a non-enterprise or a micro-enterprise or a small and medium enterprise, but a lot of those things were started there. Now, it also means that the money generated, the profits generated from the business directly affects the household immediately. So it endogenizes the growth and the impact from the economic activity. Now, it means if there are a reduction in those things, we have real serious challenges because, again, the data about poverty in Jamaica, a quintile, is quintile 5? I think it's quintile 5. And someone should verify that, where you have the highest incidence of poverty.
Yes.
Those are located in rural areas headed by women.
Yes.
Usually have a household of 4 children. I want to be verified because it's between quintile 5 or 1.
Right.
1 being the highest and 5 being the lowest, etc.
Yes.
But that data tells you then that if you already have a high incidence of poverty amongst women, and the things that we're doing is fueling greater inequity between men and women in terms of businesses, it means that the impact on the household is also going to be much, much greater in terms of a negative impact.
So what do women need to be successful as entrepreneurs based on your research?
I think women have, if you look at the makeup of a woman, what is required to become a successful entrepreneur. The question is what the people who control the status quo should do to facilitate women entrepreneurship. Because that's the real problem is,
Right.
we still live in a very neoliberalist, conservative, chauvinist society.
You're a man saying that the chauvinists, the men are chauvinists?
But I mean, so our mother growing. 80% of every Jamaican people grow by their mother, man. So we're not living in an illusion, man.
All right.
If a man ever grow a certain way, we couldn't vote. And that is the reality. But if you're a chauvinist, and our information show you, women get less pay, they have less access to capital, them all those things. But I'm saying now, what is required? Every society have an ecosystem that supports businesses. The entrepreneurship ecosystem. The majority of players in the MSME sector tends to be women as well. If you speak to JBDC, they'll let you know that. We have just completed that update of the MSME policy. And a big part of the MSME policy tends to be mainstreaming gender, focusing on women entrepreneurship in particular. Yes? In Vision 2030, we speak to goal number 2, that the society is just. Goal number 1, that all Jamaicans are empowered. All Jamaicans are empowered to achieve their fullest potential. And Jamaicans include both male and female. That the economy is prosperous as well. So you speak about the MSME sector. So I'm saying, if you look at what the goals are, all goals of Jamaica, gender mainstream is central to all of those elements. So the question is, do we have an ecosystem that truly supports women-owned enterprises? We have programs now. Do not deceive ourselves. There are programs and projects with that kind of focus. But it is a development strategy that is required. So you have all of these other partners, and I know all these partners who are out there working. Every time you read a call for proposals for development, gender mainstreaming is a central part of it.
So what's missing? So why did we fall?
The state. Because projects don't support development, it's programs. So when a man comes into a project and the project ends, what happens? The state don't have no program. Look at the budget of the Ministry of Culture gender, entertainment, and sports, and you'll see. So if the ministry itself is not properly resourced, and an agency that depends upon the ministry's budget is under-resourced, then there's no indication that there's a seriousness about moving what the mandate of those organizations are. See, so let me give you an example. The country is serious about tourism, so a tourism enhancement fund.
Right.
Based on an act.
Right.
Because we know that you have to have money to support tourism. So why there's nothing like that to support culture? And tourism consume culture.
Okay.
And there's no MOUIC with the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Employment and Sports, and the Ministry of Tourism to say, okay, given that you have the TEF, we're going to ensure that a substantial part of this budget goes towards supporting women in enterprise, because women in enterprise is a big part of Jamaican culture. Those are not magic things that can be done. Those are things that can be done quite easily. But why is that is not a strategic priority? Which means then, if a sister like Babs Grange needs funding, she don't have to go to Ed Bartlett to speak about that, rather than have something that is already structured, which means regardless of who is in power,
right,
or which government is in power,
right,
that relationship will exist, because you realize the fact that gender supports what you want to
Let's look at one area of the entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Yes.
Funding.
Yeah. No.
What are your views? Because in my view, the microfinance industry has blossomed and bloomed as a source of capital, but this is the most expensive capital available. Then you have credit cards, again, easy to get, high cost.
Yes.
The money that is not expensive, that is not burdensome, is hard to get.
Yes, there's a kind of there's a kind of intellectual dishonesty out there.
Oh my goodness, intellectual dishonesty?
Yeah, man.
Ooh, that's heavy.
Because remember, if we argue, if we argue that MSMEs, seeing a transition MSME is the backbone of a developing country. The MSME sector is primarily dominated by women. Remember, we argue that is the backbone. It is dominated by women. So how is that you don't have the programs through the state? Albeit, you have in the policy, it says that at least 30% of all resources must be made accessible to women. That's what the MSME policy says. So the policy is clear. But the Ministry of Industry and Commerce don't have no budget either. It's the Ministry of Finance. So you have the other players who have done what they should do. There's some funding available for the MSME space, like 2 years ago, like $1 billion was made available to support MSMEs, which they claim that sisters will be able to access. And you might have other programs, but when you look at the number of MSMEs in Jamaica, so you speak to a JBDC.
It's 422,000.
Right. So you divide 1 billion by 422,000, that's what it comes down to. Now, in my head, I'm saying to myself, what is the net international reserve of Jamaica currently? They boast about it. It's a couple billion US.
Yeah.
About 5 billion. Now, basic economics tell you that saving is a contraction. Expenditure leads to an expansion. See? And therefore, when you have a large NIR, yes, it sends a signal, a precautionary signal which says, just in case we are able to do, yes. Do we truly need such a large NIR? And note that I'm not going to say you're going to give grants, no. You're going to inject 1 billion out of your NIR into the engine of growth of your society, which is the MSME sector and the entire ecosystem, which means that a JBDC now will be able to establish more facilities that support production, etc. for MSMEs. You might be able to set up things like we have a special economic zone that we have established, and a special economic zone, you could have a special economic zone for MSMEs. Not saying that it have to be integrated into the export market, like what is the mandate of the current SEZD, but you want a situation which is like an innovation hub that supports the SRC will get expanded facilities, the Bureau of Standards Jamaica will get expanded facilities, RADA will get expanded facilities, all those core people, just as our TAJ has digitized their platform and COJ has digitized their platform to support these things, they can expand facilities, which means then, given that sisters tend to be more risk averse because of the nature of their business and because I'm from the business, they'll become more confident now because the ecosystem has been bolstered to support their business over the life cycle of the business. Why is this not done? There's a decision to be made. Remember, you know, you're investing now, you know. You're going to make capital available to the MSME space. And I mean in a very easily accessible way. So, in terms of this is about who should be given capital. So, for example, we gave the money to DBJ, which was a lot of positive work. But DBJ has to funnel this money
and that's the development
bank of Jamaica. Yeah. Has to push this to establish commercial entities. So we need to rethink what our...
All right, so let us narrow this down. So we have an ecosystem that is not particularly supportive of what women need. But then there's financial planning, access to capital, the support that the MSME sector, the entrepreneurship that women need is almost the same thing that they need with investing, which is information broken down, explained in a way, accessible in a way. Yeah. But what we have now is not the case. We have let me say so many silos.
Let me say like this though. Because again, I look at the system, I know it's established out there. And you'll be shocked to know the amount of support structures that exist, including things that support bankruptcy and insolvency for the MSME space.
Yes.
So most people don't know, and most people don't access because they just don't know as well. And again, if the real demand for the service should come to the fore, the service providers are under-resourced and cannot even meet that demand. So note, you know, we have the models, we have institutions, but you don't build out the institutions properly. Them don't have a proper marketing budget. Yes? So when I look at the ecosystem, I lament because you have so much institutions with people are committed, but the tradesmen them don't have no tool. You know what I mean? And then it impacts them service provision to those who truly need that service. I mean, when you go to some of these different activities and you see what people are doing, and when you speak to some service provider, and let me use a real example because JBDC is an entity.
And that's Jamaica Business Development Corporation.
We have been doing work with JBDC for decades now, even through our degree program. And for decades, Miss Vera and her team with Aral, them wanted more factory space. They have just opened an oil extraction facility. But Miss V, them would really want to know you have these production facilities straight across the island.
Yes.
Because most of these things are concentrated in the urban space. You know what it means then? A rural business person who's a woman have challenges because a lot of the programs are concentrated in town. And if you listen to TV, you know, and etc., you hear a lot of more programs being brought into rural areas. But I'm saying, you don't want Ms. V to be scratching her head about where we're going to get the budget to go to the clients. You don't want that kind of situation.
So let's be very clear. The challenge that women face in order to lift themselves, because then they're lifting their families.
Yes.
So there's a multiplier effect.
Positive multiplier effect.
All right. The challenge is we're narrowing it down to really is lack of information.
Yes. And
lack of guidance. Yeah. And structures that are not supportive.
Yeah, man. Inadequate support for the structures that provide support to women. And that is a big, big problem. I realize that in the ecosystem generally, not just entrepreneurship. If you're talking about community safety and security, if you're talking about agriculture, if you're talking about general social development, if you're talking about enterprise development, none of those key service providers are resourced properly. You do not check all history of them. Rather, you don't have enough extension officers. JBDC, you don't have enough extension service providers. SDC, you don't have enough social development officers. The JCF don't have enough community-based policing officers. So all those entities that are established to do these things are not resourced properly. Now, who decides what resource and how resources are allocated? Is the Ministry of Finance. And I don't think people talking about this thing here enough. We don't talk about it enough. The people can only spend what they're allocated through a Ministry of Finance.
Right.
No, so I hear a ministry, and it's not about a GLP ministry or a PM. This is a philosophy of a ministry that has been doing this for the last 50 years. That's why the country can reach where it's supposed to go. You know, how do we allocate resources? Where do we target? Do we truly have a metrics to say, okay, the rate of return on investment in the cultural and creative industry is greater than that in the mature industry of tourism, and therefore it might be best to allocate resources more into the creative industries than into hotel industries. Do we do those things? But that's what we're supposed to be doing.
But I want to narrow back down,
Yes.
right? So I want us to give like a summary.
Yes.
If you're talking directly to women entrepreneurs,
This is what I would say.
Give me like 3 or 4 things they must do
Yeah, man,
tomorrow.
this is what I should do.
Tomorrow.
Allocate more money to support women access to credit and youth access to credit through a DBJ, but this must be financed. This must be funneled through a JBDC, not through a NCB or a Scotiabank or any of those traditional banks. Either build out the capacity of JBDC to offer those financial services, or you look at other kind of banks like PC banks, let them offer those financial services and things, because that is what is required. But at JBDC, if you speak to a JBDC or a RADA who deals with MSMEs, they would have already known which MSME have the capacity to absorb and utilize the resources properly. So you don't have to worry about the search time and all those big questions that surrounds it. You wouldn't need that, because once they are recommended by a JBDC, give them access to the capital. Because JBDC will also now provide the incubator support service for those businesses. Now, if JBDC can only currently support 5,000 based on resources, it means that the next recommendation must be to allocate more resources to the JBDC, the SRC, the Bureau of Standards. All those support institutions need to get additional resources if we expect them to provide more services to more MSMEs out there. The third thing I would say is that make the information available and accessible, which might require now building out and amplifying the networking program being done by the state. Why do I say this? A lot of rural women don't have access to online systems. A lot of training can be done online. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, you're now going to try to build out additional infrastructure in rural spaces. But in the short run, build out the networking platform so the information can reach those persons. And it also means that the institutions that support MSMEs must get a budget to support marketing. There are too many programs being done by these institutions that the people are not necessarily aware of. We might be aware of it in Kingston. You know, I might hear it, but there's not this constant access to the information. So part of what you're recommending in the policy, when you're developing policy, look at what they call a one-stop shop, which is a digital platform where persons can go onto that platform to get all that they need to get. What is the beauty of this? I have found that the state institutions are already prepared to do this. They want to get this done. But who is going to finance the development of such a platform?
Right.
So the Ministry of Industry, Business and Commerce is trying to get support to do those things. But I'm saying to you, if we agree and accept that MSMEs and women businesses are crucial, that we don't need to go to somebody outside of Jamaica. That should be a priority issue for the Ministry of Finance as part of their budget.
Okay.
We can't depend upon other people to finance the essential things.
Last point. What are you saying to the individual woman entrepreneur? What are you saying to her?
All right. Their access to funding for women, which is not, these are not loans now, these are grants. You have individual funding, but majority of those funding tend to be for group funding, so you're a community-based organization. So there are a couple of things. But I argue is that you must evidence that you have the capacity to utilize the resources properly. If not, you're going to get yourself in problem. So just as our SDC will come in and say, okay, let me see what your books are like. You know, your history, your operations. No, if you don't have that, get to our SDC, and I'm very serious about this. Because
and the SDC
is the Social Women Commission.
Yeah.
Because the SDC have what is called a Local Economic Development Initiative Program, an LEDI program, where they actually build the capacity of people who run nano-enterprises. So yes, these are some small and micro enterprises. Now, if you find that you need greater support after you have gone through a SDC, you go to a JBDC because those systems are in place. So you want to get it in, because formalizing the operations, and formalization don't necessarily mean just registering a business, you know. Formalization means adopting business practices so one can see a record of. Because when you apply for a grant,
yes,
they're going to use those information for grants, etc. So once you have that structure in place and you're a part of an organization, you're able to access some financial resources. But people don't know. Let me give some examples. Heart, NSTA, offers $300,000 annually to 100 non-enterprises. Every year they do that, about $30 million. JCIF sometimes have programs. SDC have, well, very small grants because they don't have much money. NHG, through their social venture arm, also have funding. DBJ, from time to time, you'll hear of different grants to support, and DBJ is willing, I find, to support people in terms of if you have good ideas. They also have what is called the Gemini program, which replaced the voucher program, where they had persons who were able to write the business plans, etc. You know, so they have those programs in place. So there are several programs out there in place. EFJ, Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, also have grants that support businesses in like sustainable agriculture, in tourism, in alternative energies. So you have a lot of people are unaware of what the grant funding landscape is like. So women need to start connect with those institutions that offer services, but also become a part of the grant space. The positive about women in business is that once they start to become trained and exposed, they tend to follow these things properly, you know.
Yes.
They adapt the practices properly, but it's because they just do not know.
Yeah.
So find out as much as you can and note that what I'm saying here, you can get that same information from a Jamaica Businessmen Corporation. You could also get it from my SDC, so you don't need to start to reach out some of those persons. But support is there, I think.
All right. My name is Dennise Williams, and this is Financially Focused. We dived deep into the social structure of women in entrepreneurship, looking at, unfortunately, the drop in the status of women in terms of Jamaican women and the global scene. But then we had our awesome guest, Dr. Knife, who has given us the recipe to get back on track. And for the individual woman entrepreneur, he is encouraging you, get to the government agencies, get your books in order first, show that you can manage what you have, and then get to the government agencies to get funding, grant funding to support your business. Be sure to check the links below, visit our website, and I'll see you in the next conversation.